So, I've never been an extremely political human being. I turned 18 just in time to register and vote for Al Gore because I was raised liberal. But because I lived in Florida at the time, I don't know if you guys remember what happened with the voting fraud and the hanging chads and all of that. Even though Gore received more physical or popular votes, when he lost Florida under extremely dubious circumstances, he lost the electoral advantage and thus the election. So needless to say, my first voting experience was not a good one. I felt cheated. I felt like my vote didn't count. 2 years later, the president I didn't vote for sent us into a war that I completely disagreed with. I sat and watched CNN as we invaded Iraq. I watched as the news came back that in our first skirmishes, we had slaughtered thousands of Iraqi soldiers with only a handful of wounded Americans. And that was it for me. I swore off news, I swore off politics, and I stayed true to those decisions for 12 years. I didn't vote for Bush's second term, and I didn't vote for or against Obama. I didn't care anymore. A little over a year ago, I needed a life change. I moved out of Los Angeles and back over to the East Coast. I spent months considering who I was and who I wanted to be moving forward. I wanted to be a better man. I wanted to be a better member of society. I wanted to be a better member of the human race. Shortly thereafter, the first candidates for the 2016 presidential election began to announce their intentions to run. Tons of Republicans. I'll put up some kind of graphic on the screen because it's too many to list off. And 3 Democrats. This was it. This was my chance to make a big change in my life. If I was going to be a good member of society, I needed to know what was happening, and I needed to take part. I owed a debt to my civic duties, so I watched. Every debate, every town hall, every post-primary speech, and many of the regional speeches that got posted online or that were aired on TV. I dug in on the news. I watched CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. I watched local news and NBC Nightly News. I watched Meet the Press and 60 Minutes on Sundays. And I delved into the world of online news that I had been strategically avoiding for over a decade. It's really not easy to avoid news online, but I managed it. As the months passed, I picked up words and phrases I'd never heard of, and I researched them. Feminism was a good one. Ultimately, my research into feminism got me here on this channel. But also things like the TPP and NAFTA, the Keystone Pipeline, Gaddafi and Libya, Assad in Syria. The list goes on. I took in information from both conservative and liberal sources. Very early on, I told myself that I would not sit in an echo chamber with ideas that I agreed with, no matter how tempting that would be. And just so we're clear, I do not have a higher education. I was set to attend a college in New York City for theater when 9/11 threw a wrench in my plans. I'm no expert. I'm just a normal guy watching the process unfold before me. Also, I'll show you my political compass results so you understand that for the most part, I'm pretty close to the middle. Actually, it turns out that I'm just a little right of Gandhi, so that's a thing. I guess what I'm trying to say is, the following comments on the 2 remaining presidential candidates and their party conventions are just opinions from a regular guy. It is as much your right to agree or disagree with these opinions as it is my right to express them. I'm 100% unapologetic in what I believe, and I would be more than happy to engage in constructive discourse in the comments below. But I've noticed in my life that politics tends to bring out the worst in people, and if that is the case for you, I can promise you I won't partake. I want to share my thoughts. I will share my thoughts, but I love you guys too much to fight with you. So let's keep it civil, shall we? And on a final note, before we dive in, this is a one-off type of video. I do not want to make politics a focus of my channel. So, this primary season was, without a doubt, a doozy. Up front, I'll share with you that I did vote for Bernie Sanders, despite disagreeing with his stance on a handful of issues. For me, the number one issue that I cared about out of everything that was addressed in the 10 or so months of active campaigning was, not so ironically, the campaign finance system and the place of money in politics. I find corruption despicable. I hate it. Politicians can be as dishonest as the stereotypes assert they are, but they should be using their dishonesty for the people, not for the special interests and corporations lining their pockets. They are public servants, not privatized servants. And for me, this was the issue I cared about the most. And early on, either in the first or second town hall, the Democrats were posed a question. It was stated that in a 4-year term, a president can only usually get one big issue taken care of. For Obama, it was Obamacare. They were asked which would be their number one issue if they could only choose one to serve as their primary focus. Bernie's response wasn't free college or healthcare. It wasn't social justice reform. It was campaign finance reform. Repealing Citizens United and returning the system to one that removes money from politics. That was when he had me. And even though tons of communism-seeking millennials took to the streets and did everything they could to make me hate Bernie Sanders, I did not and do not regret my vote. And if Bernie had won the nomination, he would still be an easy choice for me. With that said, Bernie didn't win. We have Donald J. Trump, the J being implemented during the convention apparently, and Hillary Rodham Clinton, the Rodham being sidelined throughout the campaign season. So Trump and Clinton, two choices that couldn't be more different or more undesirable. So what's the pitch? What we're here to try and figure out is, between two bad choices, which one is worse? I've got some thoughts, but honestly, I doubt I personally will know who I'm voting for until I'm checking the box in November. I can say for 100% certain, though, that I will not vote for one of the two. I just have to decide if I despise that one enough to cast my vote for the other one in protest. Or if I'll look into a third-party candidate, which seems highly unlikely. Or maybe I'll just write myself in. Who knows? So, I feel like the choices can be pretty well summed up by their conventions. If you were lucky enough to have gotten by without watching the conventions, I'll share a brief rundown of each in order of when they took place. First, we had the Republican National Convention. From early on at the RNC, the tone was pretty clear. The party was divided on the issue of Trump, but completely united on the issue of Hillary Clinton. Most of the speeches given were all-out diatribes on why Hillary is a terrible candidate, and quite a few barely mentioned Trump at all. But the crowd was tuned in. There was a lot of chanting during both conventions, but the most common chants at the RNC were USA, which happened a lot, and lock her up, which I found to be hilarious. There were two hiccups during the 4-day event. The first was Melania Trump's speech, which apparently had borrowed lines from Michelle Obama's speech 8 years prior. The second was Ted Cruz giving a speech for people to, quote-unquote, vote your conscience, during which the crowd chanted, endorse Trump, much to Ted's chagrin, and he refused to do so. These were the passing embarrassments that were given hours and hours of media coverage over several days each. Otherwise, the RNC speeches were average. The speakers were okay. The highlights were Trump's kids, and they all did a respectable job, including Tiffany Trump, who I didn't even know existed. Ivanka was the star of the show, and Donald J. Trump's speech was extremely negative, but certainly in touch with how most Americans feel. Even, I would guess, the Hillary supporters who swear up, down, left, and right that everything in America is just swell right now. Then we had the Democratic National Convention the next week, after a weekend of drama over emails that were hacked and leaked, revealing a long and sordid, dirty laundry list of realities, from the DNC working against the Bernie Sanders campaign to some extremely non-PC language exchanged between members of the pro-PC party. So the DNC had a rocky opening. There were protests outside leading up to the event, which were barely covered by the media. Then, on the opening afternoon of the convention, almost every single speaker was interrupted with boos and chants of Bernie by delegates who were protesting inside the convention. Again, just only slightly covered by the media. Between every speech, they aired million-dollar propaganda ads that were either propping up Clinton or tearing down Trump. And I mean almost every speech. I would be shocked if the DNC didn't end up spending hundreds of millions of dollars. The second day of the convention, after Bernie Sanders made the nomination for Hillary Clinton official, there was a walkout. You couldn't really see it on TV because all of the Hillary states were assigned the floor area in front of the stage. So I had no idea that this happened until I went on Twitter after the night's events had ended. But there are videos you can find online of the auditorium above the floor being almost completely empty. At least 1,000 people walked out in protest. And again, this wasn't covered in the media at all. In fact, I watched a string of Democratic congresspeople go on TV and talk about how the party united around Hillary and how it was so obvious because there wasn't any chanting anymore. Little did we know, there wasn't any chanting because everyone had left. Not only that, but I read online where some of the people who walked out were discussing the fact that prior to day 2's festivities, everyone was told that if they booed or chanted Bernie, they would have their credentials seized and would not be permitted back the following days. So yeah, like real unity. But leave it to the media to completely ignore this insanely important reality of what was happening. The following convention days, you would have thought the protesting was over, but it wasn't. Instead of chanting and risking their credentials being taken, the Bernie supporters either didn't show up or they wore neon yellow shirts that glowed when the lights were dim, serving as a silent distraction to the speakers. Again, not covered by the media. In general, though, setting the protesting aside, like the RNC, the speeches were average. Certainly, the celebrities were of much higher quality. Of course, if you know anything about Hollywood, you'd know that actors who out themselves as conservative are generally blackballed. So this is hardly a surprise. The speakers attacked Trump just as much as the Republicans attacked Clinton, but this was glossed over in the media coverage because it didn't fit the narrative that the liberals are the good guys. I can't say that there were any real highlights when it comes to the speeches given, though. Lots of cringe, and in the end, Hillary Clinton's speech was very boring, which the media explains was on purpose to show us that she's the safe and serious choice. So if you couldn't tell, I'm already coming across as biased. But that's just it. This may seem like bias to you, but the two conventions were very different, and the coverage of the two conventions was very different. You can call me biased, but I say that I'm just reacting to what I was given. There were no media cover-ups of the RNC. The Democratic convention was a train wreck, and the media instead painted a tale of unity as proof that there is hope for the world. I'm not biasing these into existence. This is what happened. And sure, if I see injustice like this, I will tilt biased against the group that is benefiting from the injustice. If there is anything I've learned from SJWs, it's how privilege works. Well, there was some serious Democrat privilege going on the past 2 weeks in the media. And I'll admit that in the end, I'm most angry with the media. I walked away from the Democratic convention feeling like finding the hole in the sand that I had pulled my head out of a year ago and shoving my head back down into it. And that was the media's fault, not Trump or Clinton. I don't know if it's always been like this or not, but I have to say that it's a real problem. A huge problem that goes hand in hand with money and politics. If the news networks, which are owned by massive conglomerates, can skew the message and decide elections, then the system is completely broken. And normal, average people who innocently think a station like CNN is unbiased and providing good information are being brainwashed. And don't get me wrong, alright? Fox News spews some Titanic-sized bullshit too. But there is only one Fox News. Every other news source is liberal biased and happy to control the outcome. There isn't a single unbiased news outlet. How can this be possible? How can this be okay? At what point do we look at the system in place, right? The DNC emails revealing that they never had any intention of allowing Sanders to win, revealing that they had no qualms with controlling the media narrative, the convention flooded with propaganda ads that cost hundreds of millions of dollars that could have gone toward fixing some of the problems facing us, and a media that works in concert with the politicians to hide the truth, to paint a false reality, to manipulate the people. At what point do we look at this system and admit that it seems eerily similar to historical regimes in countries that held zero shared values with the United States and her people? And what's worse, half or more of the people are either blind or consenting to it. It's just so... Okay, all right. Just take a breath. There. Much better. Now let's set all of this aside for a minute and address the candidates directly. Who is Donald Trump? He's a businessman who has always had an eye for the limelight. He's always been provocative. He's always said things that rile up anger in a lot of people. He's an entertainer. If you've ever watched The Apprentice, you know he's actually a pretty normal person. He can't stop himself from lashing out when people speak about him in a less than positive light. He's far from politically correct. He can be a nice guy, and he can be a real asshole. I think it's fair to say that most normal human beings are capable of both as well. He's not good at relationships. His past wives would attest to that. He's selfish, and while I have no doubt that he loves his kids, I think it's fair to say that he had no qualms letting other people raise them. He cares about his legacy. Who isn't Donald Trump? Well, for one, I found zero evidence that he is a racist. When he said that Mexico is sending its criminals, rapists, and murderers to the United States, he wasn't saying that Mexicans are all rapists and murderers. He was saying that Mexico was taking advantage of our open borders by walking its vile criminals to the border and pushing them over into our country. Now, is this true? I have no idea. I doubt he has any real idea. The accuracy of such a statement does not change the fact that the statement was not racist. His attacks on the Mexican judge who was overseeing the Trump University civil lawsuit, his implying that because he's Mexican, he wouldn't be a fair judge, again, not racist. He's been touting his plans to build a wall and make Mexico pay for it. The judge was clearly proud of his Mexican heritage, so you can see where there'd be a conflict of interest. And just to be clear, Mexican is not a race. Mexico is a country, not a color of skin. This is something that leftists tend to love to do. It's low-key, diabolical strawmanning at its ugliest. I have no horse in the race when it comes to Trump. I am not a Trump supporter. I just see the truth for what it is and speak it. Trump is not an Islamophobe. Saying that you want to put a temporary ban on Muslims entering the country, while stupid, is not Islamophobic. At the RNC, they clarified he's looking to halt travel from countries that have been identified to be hotbeds of ISIS activity, which is what I said he should be saying from the beginning. Not here on the channel, but in my personal life to people. ISIS is a real threat. When we were at war with Germany, we weren't taking German refugees. We weren't taking flights from Berlin. We're at war with people who want to kill us, whether you like it or not. We don't owe it to anyone to accept refugees from these countries or to allow people to travel from these countries to America during this time of war. Anyone who says otherwise is a threat to your life. Period. It takes 5 minutes to see the kind of damage that these people are doing in Europe to recognize this plain fact. And don't get it twisted. The only reason France is taking the brunt of most of these attacks is because there isn't a land border between the United States and the Middle East. If there was, there's no question that Paris and Nice would have been New York and San Francisco or some other unlucky cities. And no doubt there would be even more. In my first video, when I listed off the groups or the indicators that I felt deserved equality, right? Religion was not a qualifier for me. Religion is a choice. You're born with your gender, your race, your sexuality. You can't control aging. You elect to be religious. You choose to read a book and follow its guidance. Like with politics, I don't have any intention of ever getting into religion on a large scale in this channel. I'm of the camp that believes religions as a whole have brought far more good than bad into the world. I just am. But I also believe that because religions are ideologies and not birth conditions, they should be open to peer review like any other ideology. They should be questioned. And they are guilty by association with groups who read the same books and follow starkly different patterns. It's been my feeling on feminism, and it's definitely my feeling on Islam. If you don't want to be lumped in with the psychopaths, you need to stand up and speak out against the psychopaths. Trouncing around and crying about how it's not fair that people are scared of you just because ISIS is murdering people left and right, that's just a good way to make me question your loyalties even more. So no, wanting to protect our country with a temporary ban on international Muslims, however misguided you think it is not Islamophobia. It's national security. And it's certainly not a commentary on domestic Muslims. But if you listen to the liberal media, that's what they say it is. Yes, in truth, it is the liberal media that is fanning the flames of hate more than anyone else. Next, Trump, as far as the evidence shows, is not a misogynist. There's a pro-Clinton commercial out there pointing out every mean thing Trump has said about or to individual women, or the way he views the responsibility of the women in his own family. Like when he called Rosie O'Donnell a fat pig in response, I might add, to her own slander against him. Since when did an attack on an individual become some overarching definition of your character? So you hate Rosie O'Donnell, therefore you're a misogynist? Really? That's how that works? So everyone who has ever made a personal gendered attack on a member of the opposite sex is a misogynist or a misandrist? Really? So Anna Kasparian calling Alex Jones a fat fuck automatically makes her a misandrist? Every woman who has ever called a man a dick is a misandrist? Every man who has ever called a woman a bitch is a misogynist? Adults understand that that isn't how insults work. Every single human being alive has said something really shitty about another human being or to another human being. Period. All of us. It doesn't define who we are. It just defines our relationship with that individual. If Trump had said, women are just a bunch of fat pigs, that would be a whole different story. But that's not how it happened. He said just as many crappy things about men. Trump doesn't reserve his vitriol for any one group. It's another false equivalency to assault his character, which is stupid because there is plenty there to assault his character without bending the truth to fit a narrative. It is verifiable truth that Trump has always hired women into management positions in his companies. It's not exactly something misogynists would do. So that's who Trump is, and that's who Trump isn't. Now, what do I think about Donald Trump? I'm sure that you're dying to know. Personally, I've always liked Trump as a celebrity. I've watched every season of The Celebrity Apprentice and a few seasons of The Regular Apprentice, and he has always given off a vibe that I just jive with. In fact, I was very Trumpy long before Trump was the Trump we know, right? When I was in high school, for reasons I can't remember, I decided I wanted to be my senior class's vice president. In my school, honor students, of which I was one, believe it or not, honor students made up about 15 to 20% of the school, right? While standard level kids were about 80 to 85%. But only honors kids ever ran for class office. So usually the winners were random because most of the people voting had no idea who the people running were. Well, I, being the clever devil I was, decided to campaign in an unorthodox fashion that seriously put me on the shit list of a whole bunch of teachers in the school. For starters, I wasn't going to put up normal, boring campaign posters with my face and name on it. Instead, I put up full-on poster board size signs designed for the purpose of name recognition alone. Whole boards had my first name in huge capital letters and nothing else. Other boards were completely blank, but with my name written super tiny in the middle, so you had to walk up to it to see what it read. I made name tags that I handed out in the lunchroom with little slogans. Imagine, like a bum eats dirt, vote wolf, for instance. Or I draw an eye, a heart, and 2 circles with dots in the middle. Yes, I heart boobs, vote wolf, and dozens of other disgusting, inappropriate, lewd messages that were meant for one purpose alone. Get the 80% to know my name, so when they saw it on the ballot, it would click in their mind as familiar. Everyone votes for what's familiar. And then, when I gave my speech to the school, I crossed all kinds of lines. I crossed lines I really should not have. I opened up by saying, I'm not going to lie to you. Not because I can't, I'm actually a very good liar, but because I believe you deserve the truth. Then I proceeded to shit on the previous year's prom theme. I took shots and cracked on a few teachers. And then I closed by saying, don't vote for me because you want to. Vote for me because you have to. I was an instant legend. Years later, people would walk up to me in Walmart and hit me with quotes from my speech. I won by a landslide and could have won for president had I actually wanted any responsibilities. So what I'm trying to say here is, I get Trump. I like Trump. And while I think a lot of the stuff he says is wrong to say, extremely unpresidential, those are my issues with him. He's not a racist. He's not a misogynist. He's not an Islamophobe. He's a guy who's working the system to win, just like he's done with his career as a businessman. And no, I don't fault him for a second for gaming the system in his favor. Why should I? It's not his fault the system is broken. When I'm playing a video game, I don't fault other people for exploiting a bug to get ahead. That's how we learn that there is a bug. We should be glad those people are doing it, and we should be pissed at the gaming company, or in this case, the government, for not fixing it when they realize right in front of them that it's a problem. Now, do I think Trump should be president of the United States? Absolutely, 100% no. But do I think he'll send us into the apocalypse? No. In fact, I trust him to do very little as president because I genuinely believe that Trump cares about his image and his name's value more than anything else. Trump as president will do everything he can to go down as one of the most liked presidents in history. And I do believe that means kowtowing to liberals as much as conservatives. Now let's talk about Hillary Clinton. Who is Hillary Clinton? Hillary is an ex-First Lady of the United States, married to one of the most popular presidents in American history. During her time as First Lady, many people talked about Hillary as though she was running the show. So it's absolutely fair to attribute a lot of the good things and a lot of the bad things that took place during those 8 years to her as much as to her husband. She was vocal. She came out in support of quite a few negative things like NAFTA that are currently being used against her. She was also the wife who stood by her cheating husband who was nearly impeached from the presidency. Hillary is an ex-New York State Senator. She was on the job when 9/11 took place, and she did her job in fighting for the city of New York in the days, weeks, and months that followed. She also voted to send us to war in Iraq, despite mountains of evidence that such a conflict would do more harm than good. She later ran against Obama for the presidency in 2008 and failed, but was later named his Secretary of State. During her time, she was involved in overthrowing Gaddafi in Libya, which created more chaos in an already turbulent region of the world, among other things. But that's all her resume. Who is she? Well, Hillary, in my opinion, is power hungry. The only thing common in all of her public service has been her intentions to get further ahead. She is a flip-flopper. She follows the polls. When 51% of America was against gay marriage, Hillary was against gay marriage. When 51% of America was for gay marriage, suddenly she had been a leader in LGBT rights since anyone can remember. Hillary is a free agent. She has had close ties to Wall Street since her time as a senator in New York. Her foundation has received donations from foreign powers, such as Saudi Arabia, that support all sorts of terrible things. And more than anything else, like all politicians, Hillary is a liar. But like I mentioned earlier in the video, Hillary Clinton only lies to protect her own interests and not the interests of Americans. FBI Director Comey came out and exonerated her in the email server scandal, but he only exonerated her of legal guilt. He labeled her choices as negligent and careless. And despite her stating that she never sent any sensitive data over email, lying that she never did this, he revealed that not only had she sent sensitive material, she sent top secret information, classified top secret at the time of sending, not retroactively, like she lied and told us. And who knows what was in the 30,000+ emails that she deleted. Has Hillary done a lot for women and children in her years of public/privatized service? Sure, there's no question. But there is a question as to whether she did that out of the goodness of her heart or whether she did it to create the image of someone who cares to further her own political agenda. I think when you consider the big picture of who she is, it's hard to really see it any other way. But that's just me. So I think it's pretty clear at this point who I believe is the worst of the two evils. Neither is honest, but only one has lied from an elected seat of office. Only one has lied from a cabinet seat of office. Only one has lied as a spouse to an elected president. Both are rich, but only one has become rich through quote-unquote public service, a role that's not supposed to go hand in hand with the term millionaire. Only one has received $250,000 for giving a speech. And I've heard them both give a lot of speeches now. I can assure you that neither is good enough at giving speeches to warrant $225,000 paychecks. Both have made bad decisions. But one has made bad decisions that cost good American men and women their jobs and money, while the other has made bad decisions that cost good American men and women their lives. And only one has the media twisting the narrative to ensure that she becomes the first female president in American history. Because making history makes great headlines. For me, what this presidential election boils down to is the Supreme Court. We have to decide if we want the next 2 to 4 Supreme Court justices to believe in traditional values, to stop the downward slide of regressivism represented by the left, or do we want some of the most pro/regressive justices taking seats with the goal of changing our way of life in the name of progress and their perception of the word better? With all that said, I still don't know what I'm going to do. I don't want to sit this one out, but we've never had two worse choices as candidates. In the end, for me, it's all going to come down to just how #NeverHillary am I? How about you? I would love to read your thoughts in the comment section. Change my mind, agree, offer another option, but please, whatever you do, keep it civil, all right? You've got plenty of YouTube channels to vent the nasty stuff. I'd like my channel to be a respite, or is it pronounced respite? I don't know. I just want it to be a place away from the anger. I love you guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. And if this is your first visit to my channel, I'm sorry you picked this video to click over on. Please feel free to subscribe anyway for content that is absolutely nothing like this, usually. Until next time, I'll holler at you later.